Alrighty, we are back with Insider Betting. We are coming back from UFC Edmonton, which, well, was a half decent card, but I enjoyed it a little bit more because I was there. But we got UFC 100 or UFC Vegas 100 this
Yeah.
weekend. So big Vegas card. It's actually a bit of a boring card, but we'll get all into it. But first things first, Jesse, how you doing, bro?
Doing great. Good job in Edmonton. Looked like a fun night. Yeah, the 100th event, the 100th fight night, UFC Vegas.
Yeah.
It's what a historic moment we've reached with this card. They really stacked the deck like they did for UFC 300. So we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, they really stacked heavy favorites
Yeah.
versus heavy underdogs. But we'll get all to all that in a second.
We'll be back to the video in just a second, but first, the NBA Cup is back, and it's time for teams to battle it out and find out who is the top dog. And you know that if you want to get on the action, we've got you covered because Inside Fighting has partnered up with DraftKings to bring you all an amazing offer where if you're a new DraftKings customer, you can go download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, bet $5, and you'll receive $200 of bonus bets instantly just by using our promo code Inside Fighting.
Yeah. Going right into things here, we have the feature prelim of the night. I see a lot of people have been talking about this card being on the main card. I think with Cody Garbrandt getting out of his fight or pulling out of his fight with, I think it was Miles Johns, the card's kind of like all flippy floppy. So I don't think these are going to be in the right order come Saturday, but whatever. We'll start here. Karolina versus Denis Gomes. I'm not going to go and pronounce Karolina's last name. This is a bit of an interesting fight. Karolina is 4 in her last 5 fights. So she's got 1 loss, which recently came to Yasmin Lucindo. Denis Gomes is 3 in her last 5. She's coming off of a win to Eduarda Mora, which was a split decision. Karolina's had a little bit of an interesting trajectory recently. She fought for the title a while back. And then she went on a 5-fight losing streak. And then out of nowhere, she went on a 4-fight winning streak. And most recently, she's lost. I think what we're seeing is surprisingly, and I know it's just 1 loss, but it's kind of like age catching up to her, you know. Denis Gomes is a massive favorite. I think she's the second biggest favorite on this card at -520 currently. Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a pretty decisive win. I think we're going to see a lot of pressure. I don't know if Karolina's ever going to get going. And I think it's just going to be the younger prospect kind of beating the older vet. But yeah, not much to say about this fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing I'm noticing about this fight is I agree with you about the age gap thing. It does seem like Karolina, she's 39. She's kind of she might be getting set up to take a beating here from the young up-and-coming prospect. Gomes, interesting the thing about her is 6 of her 9 wins have come by knockout or TKO, which is rare for women's MMA. So, especially at 115 pounds, women's MMA. So it is interesting to consider that. So if you're interested in betting the finish, that would be, I think, would be the reason why you would consider it, because doesn't seem to have much submission game, but she clearly can get knockouts and KOs. Her only loss in the UFC so far was to Angela Hill, it looks like. No, sorry, to Conclac, also Conclac Sufisara. So, yeah. But it seems
but there
like
was a lot for Angela Hill too.
Right, she took a step up against Angela Hill and then took the L. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's Gomes to win. I'd consider betting on her if I finish. I haven't looked at the odds on that, to be honest.
Yeah,
that's all I got.
Yeah. The one thing I'll say is Karolina's typically loses by decision. When she does lose, she's only lost once by knockout, twice by sub. So, although not a bad shout considering Gomes's record, but I see where you're coming from 100%.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking if you want to make money on this, otherwise I'm not touching it. So
100%.
Yeah,
honestly, I wouldn't really touch any of the fights on this card.
Yeah,
because I think it's going to be heavy favorite wins, and on the main card, the least favorite fighter to win is a -298. So there's really no value there.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple underdog picks or potential underdog picks that I'm not super confident on, but are worth the sprinkle that'll kind of come throughout the show. But to open up the main card, we have Mansur Abdul-Malik versus Dusko Todorovic. Mansur is making his his UFC debut. He's 6-0. He's got 5 knockouts, 1 submission win. He's a D1 wrestler. He's a former D1 wrestler. He wrestled at the University of Maryland for 2 years. And he had a pretty decent second round TKO win in Dana White's Contender Series, which was his last fight. The 5 fights before that are his pro fights were all finished in the first round. So something important to note there. Todorovic, he's beaten Michel Pereira. It was before he's made his UFC debut, but Michel Pereira was obviously on a bit of a winning streak there before he took his most recent loss. It does seem like it's Todorovic's last kind of chance to stay in the UFC. He's 3-4 in his time here. He's hasn't really gotten any big wins. He's gotten more big losses than anything else. But all of his fights, whether win or lose, except for one, have ended in knockout or TKO. So I think that's why he's been in the UFC as long as he has. But I kind of think it's win to stay type thing for him. With that being said, I'm going with Mansur. I think he's going to get the win. I think he's got a decent ground game. I think he's got good takedown defense, which I think is Todorovic's kind of key strength in this fight. I just think his wrestling background is going to uphold there, and then he's pretty decent on his feet too, or at least statistically, he's better than Dusko here. So that's kind of my pick. Although I don't like picking fighters who are making their debut, especially as such heavy favorites. So again, I wouldn't touch this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're considering how to bet this one, he looked great on Dana White's Contender Series. He's got a ground and pound on Wes Schultz, who we actually interviewed for fight season like a few days before, and then he ended up getting beat up. 100% finish rate so far for Abdul-Malik. So if you want to bet on this, bet on the finish here. I mean, I know, like you said, it is a debut, so that's a little bit tough to take that risk, but I think betting on the finish is probably the way to go here. And I'm looking up the odds as we speak. So I'll give it to you.
And 3 out of Todorovic's 4 losses have been by knockout.
Right.
So it's definitely a good shot, I think.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
I had the pupper come visit, eh?
Sorry. All right. My wife just came home and the dog started going crazy. All right, so minus 185 to win by KO, TKO, or DQ. You're not.
What was it? Minus 175.
185, minus 185. So
yeah, Vegas is all over it.
they're on it. It seems to be the way to go.
Yeah,
put them in a parlay.
Yeah, there's a nice KO parlay I think you can kind of make towards the end, but we can kind of go over it after.
Yeah.
Luana Pinhiero is taking on Gillian Robertson. Statistic I didn't know about, but now I do after doing some research about them. Gillian's a fellow Canadian, so I should have known this. I think she was one of the only Canadians to get a win at 297 in Toronto there.
That's right.
Yeah. But she has the most submission wins in this weight class, which I didn't know. And she's got that with 6. She's coming off of a win to Michelle Waterson Gomes, someone who both her and Pinhiero have been recently. She is coming off, or she did recently lose to Tabitha Ritchie as well, where Luana Pinhiero is coming off of 2 losses to Angela Hill and Amanda Rivas. I think I want to go towards Gillian here. I think she's really good when it comes to the ground game. Her takedown accuracy isn't the best necessarily at 42%, but Pinhiero's 66% takedown defense is also not that crazy. And really all it takes is one takedown for Gillian to kind of work her submission game, right? I think what we've seen is Pinhiero, she started off hot in the UFC. She started off 3-0. Opponents got tougher. Then she started losing. Now she's 3-2. So she's lost 2 fights since. And I think she's probably going to be 3-3. But I think there is some potential for like a little value sprinkle bet on Pinhiero here. Because she is a good opponent. So I don't understand why she's such a massive favorite, but or such a massive underdog. But I do think Robertson's likely going to win either way. So I don't know if it's worth the value bet.
You read my mind. That was the first thing I thought when I saw the odds. This feels like it's probably your best a high value pick. I will say Gillian Robertson, you know, she's still young. She's still in her prime. She's very good.
Very good.
This is it's interesting. Whenever you see like a 14 and 13 ranked fight, you're sort of like, okay, what does this really determine here? It kind of just determines like who's going to be taking that next step into like top 10 fights. That's sort of that's what they're fighting for here. So yeah, I look at Pinhiero and I'm like, hey, I kind of like plus 310 for her. Even though I agree Robertson should be the favorite. I like what Pinhiero offers in this fight. I think that she can, you know, sustain some of the ground pressure and things like that, because it's not like they're pretty even when it comes to like takedowns. Seems like Pinhiero has some issues with defending takedowns. Or no, I'm sorry, with her accuracy on her takedowns, I should say. So it's a coin flip in my mind. So because of that, even though I don't really have like a dog in this fight, I'm going to take Pinhiero just because I like the odds enough, even though I kind of agree like Robertson probably wins. I'll sprinkle on Pinhiero because I don't really have a good pick on it.
Yeah, considering Pinheiro's coming off a submission loss to Angela Hill, I think it's worth sprinkling a little bit on a submission win for Robertson here. I think it's coming in a plus 110 at the moment on DraftKings. So I think it's actually a really solid bet there. At least you kind of double your money if that happens. So
and she's beaten some really good fighters, but but here's the thing: like you have to consider who she's beaten recently. Polyana Viana, who's kind of just like I like her a lot, but she's kind of just a pretty face in the UFC at this point. Michelle Watterson Gomez, who just retired. So her last 2 wins, and then before that, she lost to Tabitha Ritchie. So like her last 3 fights don't tell me a lot, even though she is on a 2-fight win streak. I'll say about Gillian Robertson. So I'm a little hesitant on her. I'm not totally sold yet. So I guess this is kind of the test right now.
I agree. So. Moving on to the next fight, we have, or you know what? The UFC switched it up on us. Let's go here.
Oh no.
The actual feature prelim is Gerald Meerschaert versus Reinier de Ridder.
They moved this to the prelims?
No. This is the feature fight of the night.
Okay, gotcha. So, okay, all right.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah. And then Ricky Turquoise is the co-main event now. So they switched up the order there.
Ricky Turquoise, I like that. Ricky Turcios, that's so funny.
Turcios, sorry.
That's funny.
If there's one thing you can guarantee on every single insider betting episode is that I'm going to fuck someone's name up, and I'm cool with it.
Yeah,
it's part of the show, you know.
MMA is a long sport for that. There's too many names that are.
Look at this, man. Like, tell me how this name is pronounced, Meerschaert. You know, like, yeah. So anyway, this is a bit of an interesting one. Reinier de Ridder is making his UFC debut, but and that's why he's got the funny image here with the shirt on. I couldn't find any decent images of him to use. Yeah. But he's a former 1 championship, 2 division champion. But the crazy part is that he beat the same guy to win both belts. And then he lost both belts to a different guy, but it was still the same person who took both the belts away from him.
Right.
So I guess everyone at 1 is a 2 division champ. I guess it's a lot more common than it is in the UFC. From what I saw on Sherdog, he actually retired after that 1 championship fight. And then I guess he decided to come back into MMA, and he made his he fought in UAE Warriors, got a win there. And now he's coming to fight in the UFC. Interestingly enough, he seems to be on paper just a better Gerald Meerschaert. He's got a very strong submission game. He's out of his 17 wins, 11 are by submission. And for Gerald, out of his 37 wins, 29 are by submission. I think it's going to be a game on the ground and who can make the other guy tap quicker. Just based on the odds, I think it'll be Reinier, but this is I think my biggest underdog pick is going to come here. And I think Meerschaert, I think it's a game of chance, honestly, who can make the other one mess up. And I think that Gerald actually has a pretty good chance here.
Gerald Meerschaert recently tied Anderson Silva or passed him. It tied him or passed him for the most submissions in the history of middleweight. He's so he's no slouch out there. It's kind of perfect matchmaking for de Ridder here because obviously it's his first fight, and really kind of puts you to the test of like how how realistic you are. Like, what can you actually do in the UFC, especially at this point in your career, right? I believe the reason why De Ridder retired is I think that he had some like contract stuff going on with One Championship, because they've been dealing with a lot of stuff with their fighters recently with not being let out of their contracts, and I believe he wanted out, so he threatened retirement without like he threatened retirement, but he didn't actually retire. I think that's the situation that was going on here. Because I do think De Ridder's been wanting to come to the UFC for a while. He's a former champion. He's really, really, really good. But to me, this is like the ultimate test of how good really are these other organizations compared to the UFC. Like, because if you can come in and you can't beat a guy like Gerald Meerschaert, who I love, who's great, but let's be real, he's somewhat gatekeeper status at this point. Is even though he's unranked, he's just like he's a guy that you sort of use as like a measuring stick for a lot of up and comers. And I like De Ridder here, obviously. He's the favorite. He should win the fight, but I think it's more interesting as like a test of where these other organizations are at, more so than like what it says about De Ridder. For me, it's more so what it says about these other organizations that are competing with the UFC, because this guy was a champion there. So you got to beat Gerald Meerschaert if you want to prove that you can be a champion in the UFC. So I like the matchup a lot. I'm intrigued. I'm taking De Ridder, and I would consider De Ridder by finish here as a bet.
Yeah, I would just consider betting straight up submission. For the fight to end in submission is -105, like for either guy. And I think that's a really solid bet. I also, under 2.5 rounds is -140, which I really like as well, because I do think it's going to go to I think it's going to go to a finish.
Yeah. Well, we know Gerald Meerschaert's not getting a knockout, so the submission makes sense.
Yeah, and 12 of his 17 losses have come by finish, and both of De Ridder's losses have also come by finish. So I think finish is likely here for sure.
I agree. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. Ricky Turcios versus Benardo Sopaj, I think is how you pronounce that name. Interesting that this is the co-main event. It kind of speaks to the lack of excitement on this card. Both of these fighters are coming off of losses. Ricky Turcios most recently lost to Raul Rosas Jr., and then he's actually had a loss to Ayman Zahabi, who just got the win at UFC Edmonton. Benardo Sopaj, you might have seen him get absolutely brutally knocked out versus Vinicius Oliveira with the flying knee. The guy dropped. He fell face first into the ground. It was absolutely terrible for him. It was his first fight in the UFC, his first loss in the UFC, and he's still coming into this fight as a -345 favorite. I see why he's such a big favorite. I do think, like, all around, we've seen a good chunk of Turcios. He's 2-2 in the UFC, hasn't been all that crazy. I think the one thing about him is that he's got a little bit of a more unpredictable style of fighting. He did have Raul Rosas in a little bit of trouble. I think it was in the first round during their fight, but it wasn't anything too serious. I think he had like some sort of like submission look at him. But again, unless something funny happens during this fight, Sopaj should win. He's the better fighter. But will he win? Who knows? Like, when the odds are this big, it's hard to go against them, but there's always that glimpse of hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird when a guy's coming off of getting knocked out like that. You're always a little concerned about how they're going to look coming off, especially how old is he? He is
24.
24, so he should recover better than most.
Yeah.
Losing to Rosas for Turcios, kind of an emotional fight, because that was
because it was canceled and then rebooked, and it was a long time.
Some bad blood there. You could tell it really affected him to lose that fight. So he's got something to prove here. I don't hate Ricky's odds, if I'm being honest. I like +275 for Ricky. And am I going to bet it? No. But I'm just saying I don't hate it, because I like guys that are he's been in some big fights, and I just feel like Ricky's had a little bit more He's beaten good guys like Brady Houston, and Benardo's still a little bit unproven here, coming off of getting knocked out. So like, if you're looking, this is another potential sprinkle here. That's all I'll put. I'm not going to bet on it, if I'm being honest. I don't like either bet, but if I'm going to, it would be Sopaj in a parlay or Turcios little $10 sprinkle bet sort of thing.
Yeah. Main event, Neil Magny, the gatekeeper. I know we referred to Gerald Meerschaert as a bit of a gatekeeper as well, but Neil Magny has been the true gatekeeper of this division, at least. Coming up against Carlos Prates, who's on a 9-fight knockout streak and a 10-fight win streak. He looked really good in his last fight against who was it? Michael Morales? Oh no, Jinling Li.
Jingling,
yeah. So
the
Leech, yeah. Most people didn't think he was going to get knocked out. It took a while for him to get knocked out. But it happened.
He had never been knocked out before that happened too. That was the first time.
Yeah. So I think like Prates has looked really good in all his fights. He's part of the fight nerds who I speak very highly of, because those guys seem to just be getting win after win after win. I think it's what we're going to see happen again. He's a -800 favorite for a reason. I would, it's the lock of the night for sure. He's a -400 to get the knockout win, which is crazy. And Neil Magny's coming off of a knockout loss at 37 years old. Not easy. It wasn't a brutal knockout by any means. I think it was kind of like ground and pound for the most part. He kind of lost to Michael Morales the same way he beat Mike Malott. It seemed like. So it wasn't anything brutal, but yeah, I think knockout all the way. Am I betting on a knockout of -400? Absolutely not. But it's still what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess where I go with this is not so much if he's going to win, but when he wins. Look, Magny's obviously a big test. He's a gatekeeper for a reason. That term is there for a reason. This is how do you know? Is this guy ready for top 15 fights? This is going to be it. He's probably going to win the fight. It's more so what they do with like matchmaking here because of the situation at welterweight and where they're at. We got, Ian Gary versus Joaquin Buckley coming up. We've got, Sean Brady was supposed to fight Ian Gary. That's not happening. Now Bilal is sitting out of the UFC 310 fight, so it's going to maybe be Shavkat versus Usman for an interim fight. So welterweight is at this like weird stage, and I'm just curious what they would do here with Prates, especially if he gets like a quick finish where he doesn't take any damage. Because I mean, I'll just look at the welterweight rankings right now.
There isn't like necessarily someone he has to go after.
I mean, like Jeff Neal. It would potentially be next. Colby Covington's not going to take the fight. Jack Della Maddalena probably won't take the fight. So it's going to maybe here it is. Maybe it's Michael Morales versus Carlos Prates. Both of those guys are both skyrocketing here. That might be the fight that they have to make. Stephen Thompson just got knocked out. Michael Venom Page wants to go up and fight to middleweight. He wants to fight what's his name? Shara Bullet.
Yeah.
Vicente Luque. That's another one, but that's just another gatekeeper fight. I feel like maybe the fight to make here is Michael Morales versus Carlos Prates if Prates gets the win, because then that's sort of the next man up for who's going to get that top 5, that opportunity to top 5 ranking.
Yeah, I think you can even, and it's funny because I do think Michael Morales does make the most sense, because I think I'd have to check his record, but I think he's also like a knockout artist. Like he gets a good chunk of knockouts there. But you could toss Carlos Prates. If Carlos Prates gets a knockout at UFC Vegas 100, there's a very good argument that he can go into a top 10 fight immediately. He'd be 4-0 in the UFC with 4 knockouts, right? So, and he'd be on a 10-fight knockout streak. So, I think you can give kind of top 10 who's on his way out a chance to prove himself against Carlos Prates and vice versa.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm saying maybe it's Prates versus Morales, because Morales just KO'd Magny too. I guess everything is relevant to timing and how impressive the knockout was. All of that stuff is graded on a curve. We understand that. But I'm just saying that, like,
Yeah,
if
I agree
I
with
were a
you.
matchmaker, that one makes the most sense to me right now, assuming he gets through Magny.
Yeah, yeah.
So
No, it's interesting. Does Sean Brady have a fight lined up?
that was the other one. That one could potentially make sense
Yeah,
too. But Brady's also, he just got a big win over Gilbert Burns, so he might be looking for, like, hey, I want a title eliminator here. Where rather than jumping back to, the 50, because Prates will probably take Magny's number 15 ranking.
yeah,
And what is Brady going to go back and fight the 15th ranked guy? It seems a little like
yeah,
going backwards for him. I don't think he'd accept it.
yeah. No, I don't think so
So
either. Yeah, it could be a Gilbert Burns in there as well. But
yeah, could be.
yeah,
But they're Brazilian guys. They might not want to fight each other.
yeah. Well, same thing for Michael Morales. It's like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
whole
exactly.
like
No, it's
weird
true.
thing.
It's a weird situation for welterweight right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Yeah, I guess it's well, the big question mark is what's Leon Edwards going to do next,
Yeah,
Um, because he's just kind of been in the sidelines since losing the title and he hasn't really said or done anything. And there's like no speculation of when he comes back, like just like he's gone under a rock.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
It's just weird, and you're not going to see Prates fight him. So the only thing that makes sense here is
yeah,
Leon versus Brady. Would he even take that fight? I don't know. I don't know, man. But
I know.
that fight between Angaria and Joaquin Buckley,
That's gonna be
that's
massive.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's
huge
the most exciting
implications
fight in
there.
that division right now for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wait, it's more exciting than the championship fight.
it is, and
Yeah,
it's sort of like who gets to fight Shavkat kind of feeling. But then, like, JDM, he also deserves it. So does Sean Brady. It's crazy. It's
yeah.
craziness up there.
Anyway,
Yeah,
that's all we got this week for insider betting. A bit of a boring episode, but at least we're consistent.
yeah.
UFC 309 is coming up the week after in Madison Square Garden. You got John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Obviously, that's going to be a massive card. I'm hoping to be there. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But appreciate you joining, Jesse, and we'll chat next week, bro.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.